Quick question. Is fat bad for you? Well, your brain shouldn't seem to think so, seeing as though it's made up of 60% fat. Welcome back to the Chef Boy RDN podcast with your host, Chef Boy RDN. And today we are talking about fat, the bad boy of nutrition. Now, I had to really kind of go back and forth if I wanted to call carbohydrates or fat the bad boy of nutrition. You know why? Because that's what y'all do. I don't know why. I don't know why we don't like fat. I don't know why we don't like carbohydrates, but all of them are macronutrients that our body uses. And honestly, fat is now getting its just due. We still got to work on the carbs, but we'll talk about that next week. So this week we are going to talk about fats. Everything in this episode is about fat. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions about fat in general for a lot of people is that it's just bad for you. In the 70s, 80s, 90s, even, there was this big push for low fat diets, right? And so low fat diets, they would try to get as much of the fat out as possible, and they would only really focus on carbs and protein. And what did it really do? The more we research, the more we realize that we definitely need fat. Fat is good for the body for a lot of different reasons. So, what does fat do in the body? Well, it helps to give us energy, just like all of the other macronutrients, proteins, and carbohydrates. Fat is kind of interesting, though. We tend to use fat for energy when we run out of carbohydrates. Um, and it converts our fat into what we call ketones, which can then be used in energy. So when you think about things like the ketogenic diet, or if you have ever been diagnosed with diabetes, like type 2 diabetes, most of those people find out when they go in the hospital and they have what they call DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis. And so with that and with the ketogenic diet, basically your body is not able to use carbohydrates for its fuel source. When it comes to DKA, the reason why is because our blood sugar, the sugar that's in our blood, isn't getting out of our blood and going into those cells to be used for energy. So we're just having this big buildup of sugar in our blood, and that's why our blood sugar goes up, right? With the keto diet, you're actually eating low carbohydrates. So your body has stores of this broken down carbohydrate, which is glucose, right? It has stores of it called glucagon. And when our body is done using the glucagon, because we haven't been fueling and adding more carbs into it, it will switch over to ketones. So that's how we kind of use it for energy. Now, the other thing that we use fat for is hormone production. A lot of our hormones are made up of fats. Of course, we talked about some hormones last week that are made up of proteins, but a lot of them are tied to fats. It's also good for our brain health. So, our brain, again, 60% of our brain is fat, and it's made up of those omega 3s. So, it's good for our brain health. It's also good for our heart health. If you are eating the right types of fat, it has been proven to help aid in lowering the LDLs, which is what we call the bad cholesterol, raising the HDLs, which is what we call the good cholesterol. And when you do that, you help to lower your risk of cardiovascular disease. If you have high LDLs, low HDLs, your risk of cardiovascular disease goes up. So eating the right types of fat definitely help with that. And then our body stores energy as fat in our adipose tissue. So, when we think about, this is the time that we actually, the fat that we think about, that is how our body stores energy. And it's called adipose tissue. The next thing I want to talk about is healthy fats versus unhealthy fats. So at this point, if you haven't realized, to answer the question at the top of the episode, fats are not bad for you. Okay. Really, no food is inherently good or bad. They can't do anything to you. Um, they have no moral value, right? But it's all about how you use the food. Of course, we can overdo anything, we can underdo anything too. So you want to make sure that you are not over consuming those fats, and that you are trying to pick fats that help to promote better heart health, trying to pick fats that help to promote better hormone regulation, trying to pick fats that help to promote better brain health. So let's start kind of with the fats that may not be the best for you. The first one we're going to talk about is saturated fats. Now, the easiest way I can kind of explain saturated versus unsaturated as far as what to look out for, in simple terms, if it is solid at room temperature, it is very likely that it's going to be a saturated fat. And if it's liquid at room temperature, it's very likely that it's going to be an unsaturated fat. Okay. So keep that in mind. Now, with the saturated fats, you tend to find those in animal products mainly, meats, and byproducts. So dairy, eggs, things like that. Now, when it comes to meat, typically the fattier the meat, obviously the more saturated fat it's going to have. And when you think about meat, let's think about, let's say a ribeye, for example. You leave it out on the counter, right? All of that marbling, that white marbling, that glorious marbling, especially like with Wagyu, which is more white than it is red, all of that is going to be fat. And is it solid at room temperature? Yes. So it's going to be a saturated fat. So you got to be careful how much of that you have. Now, it is okay to consume some every now and again if everything is fine, if you don't suffer from high cholesterol, if you don't suffer from hypertension, and things like that, and you're not under the doctor's care when it comes to the types of fat that you eat. Having a steak every now and again is okay. Okay, but you still want to be active and making sure that you are working to keep that heart healthy. Okay, so my favorite is the New York strip. It's definitely gonna have some marbling in it. And I don't eat it. I maybe eat it maybe twice a year, maybe. Sometimes a little more if I'm feeling fancy and I make it myself. But most times I only really eat it when I go out to dinner. And I only ever get it probably again like 2, maybe 3 times a year. So it's okay to have in moderation. Now, other forms of saturated fat are going to be, of course, pork products tend to have a lot of saturated fat. So think about bacon, all of that, the white strip, which sometimes is more white than it is pink, right? All of that white is going to be saturated fat. Skin, the skin of meat, pork skin, all of that's going to be saturated fat, as well as chicken skin. So the chicken itself, like chicken breast, is going to be very lean, but the skin of the chicken has some of that saturated fat. And if you've ever seen chicken thighs, for example, which is going to be the fattiest type of chicken, you can literally see the globs of fat on the chicken thighs before they're cooked, right? And is it solid at room temperature? Why, yes, it is. So it's going to be a saturated fat. Other places that you can find saturated fats are going to be in the deli area. A lot of deli meats, sausage, hot dogs, uh, deli meat in general, those are all going to be saturated fats. So you definitely want to be careful with how much of those things you consume. Dairy products, so heavy cream, it's going to be high in saturated fat. And if you've ever had cream from like fresh from the farmer or unpasteurized, you will notice that it does have that solid film of fat on top, kind of the fat cap or the top of the cream, because it's a saturated fat. Um, Most dairy products is going to have some saturated fat. Now, that doesn't, again, inherently make it good or bad. Greek yogurt is one of the ones, especially as we're doing more research, that we find is pretty good for us, right? It is good for us. It's not pretty good for us. It's good for us. So you can definitely have that. Eggs is another one that we used to think was really bad. I mean, I remember growing up as a kid in the 90s, 2000s, giving my age away a little bit, and I would see the commercials villainizing eggs, right? And now the more research we're doing, the more now right now eggs is villainizing themselves being $1 million a carton. But if you can afford to eat them, they higher than the state. I mean, at this point, it's higher than the state. But anyway, um, so we know that that type of fat isn't as bad as we used to think it is. It's actually pretty good for us, especially if you're doing a higher quality egg. Now, I'm not one who is super, everything has to be organic and all these different and pasture out of that. But when it comes to eggs, the higher quality that you're able to get with the egg, typically the higher nutritional value of the egg. So that's one of the things that I really don't skimp out on. And now that the regular egg is the same price as the high quality egg, you might as well just pay $1 million for the high quality egg instead of getting the regular egg for $1 million. You know what I'm saying? And in some cases, which is really crazy to me, I have seen the farm raised, the brown, all of those, all the little gimmicks that they use to get you to buy the higher quality eggs. I've seen those be cheaper than just the regular standard old white egg. So I don't know. Eggs are crazy. I don't know how I got off here, but let's get back to the subject at hand. So that is everything with the saturated fats. The last thing I will say, which I kind of talked about last week, so definitely go check out my protein episode. But when it comes to ground beef, it has saturated fat. So the more something has fat in it, it tends to be more tender, tends to be juicier, it tends to have a better mouthfeel. That's one of the beauties of fat, right? And that's why we like it. And so when you have ground beef, when you tend to have a higher percentage of the small number, you're going to have a higher percentage of saturated fat. So you want to kind of do 80-20 or higher. 85-15, 90-10. They even have 97-3. And especially with like ground turkey and things like that, it can go all the way up to like 99% lean. Now, you can go back and fortify those with a little bit of like olive oil or avocado oil if you want to bring some of that moisture back. Just a little FYI. And plus, most of this stuff, when people talk about, oh, it's not fatty enough or it becomes too dry, it's because y'all don't know how to cook it. I'm not a fan of chicken breast because it's a lot of meat to get through per se, but every time I cook chicken breast, it's delicious, juicy all the way through. So, before you blame it on it having a lack of fat, just get in the kitchen, take your time, look up a couple recipes on YouTube, and just make it better. But anyway, I digress. Another fat that is not the best for you is going to be trans fat. Trans fat really is not good for you. There is no research that I have found or came across that says it's good because it's not. And trans fat, to kind of put it in very simple terms, when they take a fat that is a liquid at room temperature and then they do this process called hydrolyzation and they hydrolyze it and turn it into a solid, it's going to be a trans fat. So margarine, partially hydrogenated oil, those things are going to contain trans fats. Now, the FDA regulates kind of how much of things can be in food, right? The Food and Drug Administration, it's in the name. So they put a limit years ago on trans fats, and so you don't see a lot of trans fats in foods now. Now the interesting thing is if you have less than 0.5 grams of something per serving, then you can round it down to zero. So a lot of times, this is a side note, but if you ever see Pam spray, it's zero fat because a serving size is like a dash of a spray, and a dash of a spray weighs less than 0.5 grams. So it's not really 0% fat or fat free. They can just round it down because the serving size is so small. But anyway, going back to trans fats. So trans fats, um, you don't see them a lot around, but if you're cooking with things like Crisco and a lot of um, margarines and things like that, you really want to be careful with the trans fats. They have been shown to elevate LDLs, which is that bad cholesterol, which again helps to lead to cardiovascular disease. So you want to be mindful of trans fats. Now, let's talk about some unsaturated fat. So unsaturated fat is going to be the fat that is liquid at room temperature. And with unsaturated fats, you have kind of two different categories: mono unsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. So with mono and polyunsaturated fats, they are essential for brain cell function. They also support heart health and they help to lower the LDLs. Now, when it comes to mono unsaturated fats, you can find those in things like olive oil. So, I when I talk to people all the time, when it comes to fat, there are two things that universally everybody pretty much knows when it comes to fat. Olive oil is a good fat. Everybody know that. They be like, "Oh, I switched to olive oil years ago," and they ain't doing nothing else, but they know that olive oil is good for them. So kudos to them for doing that, right? And then the second thing that we all know is that omega 3s are good for us. Those are kind of the two main things when it comes to fat that everybody kind of got across the board. So, olive oil is going to be the mono unsaturated fat. Avocados and avocado oil is also high in mono unsaturated fats. Nuts in general are mono unsaturated fats, and nut butters. Obviously, nut butters are just ground up nuts. So almond butter, peanut butter, of course. So those are also going to be high in mono unsaturated fats. Now, polyunsaturated fats, the two that we know are the most famous are going to be omega 3s and omega 6s. Now, omega 3s are the ones that everybody loves, and for good reason. They're good for our heart, they're good for our brain. Um, and those are going to be found in wild caught fish. So think about salmon, albacore, bluefin tuna, halibut, trout, sardines actually have omega 3s in them, anchovies, things like that. Any of those fatty fish, they're going to tend to have omega 3s in them. You can also get it from flax seeds and one of our superfoods, walnuts. Walnuts actually have a high amount of omega 3s in them. So you can definitely get it from walnuts. So for me, not a fan of walnuts. And I actually have a funny story kind of about that. Growing up, I grew up in a very big family. So we would get together for Christmas at my grandmother's house. And this particular time, like every weekend, I think we would do kind of a different Christmas theme. Um, and so this particular weekend, it was like the cookie party, right? So we got together and we made cookies. And so my cousin made some. And growing up, him and I both wanted to be chefs. So we would always be like, "Oh, try this," trying to one up each other, kind of. So I took a bite of the cookie and I stopped. And I said, "Is it got walnuts in it?" And he was like, "Nah, I know you don't like walnuts. I ain't put no walnuts in there." I'm like, "No, this definitely got walnuts." Come to find out, he used walnut extract. And I could taste it. It ruined my whole day. So all of that to say, if you like walnuts, high in omega 3s. Unfortunately for me, I can't get them from there just because I can't stand the taste. But I do like fish, so I get it from that. And then we have omega 6s. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding omega 6s. A lot of people think these are what we call inflammatory oils. Um, we're gonna talk a little bit about that. So, where you can get omega 6s from is going to be things like soybean oil, sunflower oil, corn oil. Are they good for us? Are they not good for us? The research just doesn't. There's not enough support to definitively say that they are inflammatory oils. The reason why people say that is because they can break down, and products of their breakdown are things that can cause inflammation in the body. But it's almost like saying, apples has sugar in it, and so apple causes diabetes. Even though those compounds can be formed from the original compound that is in the omega 6s, that doesn't necessarily mean they are formed in the body, is what I'm trying to say, right? So there are some studies that I found. The University of Eastern Finland, they actually did a study and they found that higher linoleic acid levels in the blood were actually associated with lower um, um, CRP, which is C reactive protein. Now, CRP or C reactive protein is the protein that we use to kind of see how much inflammation is in the body. If it's elevated, we're going to have more inflammation. If it's normal, we probably don't really have a lot in our body. So they found that when your body had the linoleic acid, which linoleic acid is omega 6, um, alpha linoleic acid is omega 3. I'm just showing off now. So when you have higher levels of linoleic acid in the blood, it didn't lead to more inflammation in this study. There was another study or a meta-analysis that was done in the internal or international, can't read my own handwriting, the International Journal of Current Advanced Research. And they found that omega 6 supplementation again did not change the C reactive protein status, or it wasn't significant enough to say that it changed it. Um, so all of that to say, there's so many other studies. All of that to say, if you eat sunflower oil, if you eat corn oil, safflower oil, canola oil, there is no big definitive studies that show that it causes inflammation. Um, it, One thing I will say is they have linked it to obesity as well. And what's interesting is these oils are cheaper oils, right? They're cheaper. You can get canola oil for way cheaper than you can get olive oil, a good quality olive oil anyway. And so most times these are the oils that companies are using for highly processed foods because they can do it in a cheap way. Guess what else is linked to obesity? Highly processed foods, canned foods, and a lot of times I don't even villainize those because that's what the people have access to, right? So it's correlational, but you can't definitively say it's causational, meaning that there is some correlation between people who tend to eat more omega 6 oils and have obesity, but that's not necessarily the cause. There are so many other things that we have to look at. So, all of that to say, if you eat canola oil, if you eat sunflower oil, if you eat safflower oil, if you eat soybean oil, until I see better research that truly proves that it is inflammatory and that it is directly linked to things like obesity and heart disease, I say it's fine to eat. So, trans fat, as much as you can get away from it, the better. But you want it to be less than 1% of your daily overall caloric intake. When it comes to saturated fat, you want that to be less than 7%. Now we are back for another episode or another segment of Chef Boy RDN Tries It. And today I have these little candy bars. Can y'all see them? Okay. So this is the Unreal brand. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's in a lot of health stores. It's also in just standard grocery stores. And they basically are just trying to put out healthier candy options. Now, candy in general should be treated as a treat. Treat a treat as a treat. I say this all the time, right? So when you treat a treat as a treat, it's something that you should have maybe a few, 1 to 2 times a week, if that. It could be even further than that, but it probably shouldn't be something that you have nightly because that's no longer a treat. That's a routine, right? It's like saying brushing your teeth is a treat. It should be a routine. I hope it is. It's for me. Is it for you? All right. So with this, we are going to try the Unreal dark chocolate coconut bar. Now, the reason why I picked this one specifically is because we know that dark chocolate is high in fat. Coconut is also high in fat. These are two good fats that are okay to be enjoyed in moderation. I got the small ones because I got a big pack of minis. So here we are. Now, as far as the package, blue is my favorite color. So just for the color being blue alone, solid A. And it's simple. I like a good simple packaging. Now, as far as the look of the candy bar itself, it looks like a candy bar. I mean, it's an A. I don't even know what to say to that. And then it smells delicious. Definitely an A for that. It smells like dark chocolate. I don't really get any coconut without biting into it. It's just giving me dark chocolate right now. Okay. So it's good. It's good. It's definitely classic desiccated coconut. Tastes like coconut mounds, I think is what it's called. I'm I have a love hate relationship with coconut. I want it when I want it, and when I don't want it, I don't want it. So for me today, it's good. It's actually really good. It's not something that I would eat all the time because again, I'm not a big coconut person. But there are every now and again, like I want a piece of little coconut cake. Every now and again, like maybe once every 5 years. I don't know. It is not often. But overall, I would have to give it, honestly, for what it is, a solid A. The other cool thing about it is if you look on the back, can't really see it, but it tells all of the ingredients, and it's not a lot of ingredients, which is really good because that just means that it's not a lot of things that went into it. It's pretty simple. So definitely give it a try, especially if you're a person who likes mounds. This might be a better alternative for you. Make sure you keep it as a treat, though. And that is everything today on Chef Boy RDN Tries It. All right, and now we are back for the vitamin of the week. This week's vitamin is going to be vitamin D, which is a fat soluble vitamin. So, vitamin D is one of the vitamins that a lot of people know some general stuff about, but just as a quick refresh, because I know you already know everything there is to know about vitamin D, right? Right. But as a quick refresher, it does aid in bone health. So that's kind of one of its main biggest jobs. It actually facilitates calcium absorption. So as we eat calcium, it's the thing that helps it be absorbed into the body. It also helps with muscle function. It plays a role in our nervous system and in our immune system. Most of our fat soluble vitamins are going to play somewhat of a role in our immune system. Now, where can you get vitamin D? Well, you get it from the sun. Okay. Um, that's one of the main places. If you are of African descent or you have darker complexion skin, we tend to be more vitamin D deficient overall. So, African American, African descent in general, you're going to be more vitamin D deficient. Now, the reason being is God has blessed us with this beautiful melanin. Keeps us looking young. We be out here 60 looking 30. But the thing about that is it actually kind of blocks the sun rays from getting into our skin to help to create that vitamin D. So we aren't as efficient in making it in our skin, but going out in the sun for 30 minutes without any sunscreen on will help to naturally increase your vitamin D. And that's for everybody across the board. Now, I'm not telling you to go out on a hot day and bake, but, going out every now and again and just getting some good sun is definitely going to increase that vitamin D. Other places that you can get vitamin D is going to be from fish. Fish is a great source, fatty fish. So all those fish we talked about, salmon, trout, tuna, all those things, going to be rich in vitamin D. You can also get it from dairy, which tends to be fortified in vitamin D. So milk, yogurt, all of those things are going to have vitamin D. Cereal is fortified with vitamin D. Another interesting one that's fortified with vitamin D, which when we say fortified, that just means that it's added into it, is orange juice. Orange juice, they do calcium and vitamin D. And then eggs. Eggs tend to have vitamin D. Brown mushrooms. So the cool thing about mushrooms is if they are grown and they are exposed to UV or sunlight, they actually turn brown, some of them. And I don't know what happens, but it's actually able to make the vitamin D from the sun just like we are. So if it is exposed to sun or UV rays, it has vitamin D. Now, if it is those white mushrooms, like let's say, for example, if you've ever seen a enoki mushrooms, which are those little small baby mushrooms, they come in a pack. The white ones don't really have any vitamin D. The brown ones do. So there you go. And then I think that's everything. The last thing you can do is you can um get vitamin D from supplementation. A lot of people have to, again, because they're vitamin D deficient. And supplementation comes in two forms: vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. Vitamin D2 is called ergocalciferol. Vitamin D3 is called cholecalciferol. Most times when doctors or dietitians supplement for vitamin D, they do D3. And the reason why is because that one helps to raise your vitamin D in your blood quicker than the other one does. So that is everything on vitamin D, except for the deficiencies and the toxicities. What am I doing? So deficiencies, um, weakness, fatigue, bone pain, fractures, muscle aches, cramps, and believe it or not, vitamin D actually can affect your mood. So people who are vitamin D deficient are found to be um, have a little more depression, believe it or not. So, if you're not feeling your best, maybe go out and just get some sunlight. And then when it comes to toxicity, nausea, vomiting, kidney damage, high blood levels of calcium. So, of course, its main function is to help our body absorb calcium. If we're overdoing it on the vitamin D, then we will in turn overdo it on the calcium a lot of times. So it is something that you want to reach out to your doctor. You can always get them to check your vitamin D levels if you feel like you are vitamin D deficient, and then they can instruct you on how to supplement. And that is everything on vitamin D. All right, I want to thank you for spending today with me. Today we talked all about fats. I hope it is no longer one of the bad boys of the macronutrients in your eyes. You understand the importance and the roles that fat plays. And we also talked about different types of fats: trans fats, saturated fats. We talked about mono and polyunsaturated fats. Remember, when people tell you that omega 6s are they cause inflammation, all you got to do is say, show me the research. Show me the research. Where did you find it at? And if they're able to find it for you, then you just humbly say, okay, cool. And then maybe stop eating it. But until they find the research, it is what it is. So I will talk to y'all next week. And next week, we are going to talk about carbohydrates. Now, every week I say, this is my favorite. This is one of my favorites because fat is misunderstood, but carbohydrates is misrepresented. So next time we're going to put everything in order when it comes to carbohydrates here on the Chef Boy RDN podcast.